It was the dawn of the third age of podcasting, 30 years after the series had launched.
The Babylon podcast was a dream given form. Its goal, to discuss the place where humans and aliens could work out their differences peacefully.
It's a port of call, home away from home for established fans, newbies, Jon, Blaine, and guests.
Humans and aliens wrapped in 2,500,000 tons of spinning metal, all alone in the night.
It can be a dangerous place.
Wait, what?
But it's our last, best hope for peace.
This is the story of the last of the Babylon stations.
The year is 2024.
The name of the podcast is
Babylon 5, 30 years later.
Hello, and thank you for downloading this latest episode of Babylon 5, 30 years later. This podcast is taking a journey through the classic science fiction drama Babylon 5, releasing our coverage of each episode 30 years after the original episode was released. My name is John Wilson, and with me on this journey through something I have never seen before is my my Babylon 5 expert and mentor and coach, and I was trying to think of something suggestive that wasn't too suggestive and couldn't think of one. We're just going to keep going. Blaine Dowler, how are you, Blaine?
I'm doing well. So it's been a little hectic lately, as you could have guessed, but yeah.
Well, we did try to assassinate you, and I thought it worked, but evidently you're here, so it didn't.
Oh, what do you mean assassinate? I thought that was just a normal failure of the fusion reaction. Wasn't that just a pure mechanical problem?
I think that...
And what do you mean we?
I think I'm listening to you, but you're not saying anything worth hearing. And today we are joined by a special guest. So if you are a listener to 100 Years, 99 Films?
99 Years, 100 Films.
Okay. Numbers and words. 99 Years, 100 Films, which is a Academy Award Best Picture podcast. You have heard this other voice before with Blaine talking about the Academy Award Best winners every year. Best Picture winners, but we have with us to talk about this episode Mr. Trey Hooks. Hello, Trey.
Hello.
You're here, and we're here to talk about the episode that ended the first season of Babylon 5, or kind of kicked off the second season, depending on how you want to think about it.
Yeah, so before we get into that, Trey, why don't you just share your history with Babylon 5?
I watched part of Babylon 5 when it was airing. I discovered Babylon 5 after the point that we're covering today. So I discovered it, I want to say mid-second season. I was really into Deep Space Nine. That was my favorite Star Trek show that was on the air. And obviously because of the base and space motif, I would see and hear a lot on message boards and bulletin boards. Yes, I'm that old. Babylon 5 being compared with Deep Space Nine, so I started checking it out, and then I followed it up until it became a TNT exclusive, and even though I still had cable, that made it a little hard for me to catch it and stay caught up with it.
Okay, so you watched it regularly, I'd say, for about 2.5 years then, based on that description?
Yep.
Okay, so regular viewer for about half the run. And is this your first time going back to it?
It is.
Okay.
Have you rewatched the first season up to this point, or is this sort of a going in fresh for this episode?
Going in fresh for this episode.
Although, once these episodes start coming out, since they have been coming out, speaking in the future, maybe you'll watch along. Always a good excuse to watch along with the shows whenever there's a podcast covering it, right?
Absolutely.
That's part of how I get through the DVD collection that was growing faster than I could watch it. I would look for a podcast and say, ooh, there's one. That'll be what I used to get through it. And then I get through the show as long as they don't pod fade on me.
All right. Well, we are excited to be covering the last episode of the season. Now, we have had a bit of a break from the show because there was a broadcast break in the series Babylon 5. And we had our feedback episode, which hopefully went well. We had our He-Man and the Masters of the Universe episode, which hopefully went well because those are both in our future as we're recording this. But we are back to talk about this season finale. Now, something that is odd that we mentioned last coverage episode is that the broadcasting station, which I can never remember the name of, Blaine, but you remember. What's it called?
P10.
P10. They, instead of showing the finale as a cliffhanger dramatic ending and giving people a couple or 3 months before the second season, oh no, they held the season finale for those 2 or 3 months and then broadcast it as a lead-in to the second season. Which, before we even get into the episode, let's just talk about that as a strategy. Because Best of Both Worlds had already happened by this point a long time ago. What do y'all think about the whole, I don't want to do a dramatic cliffhanger mentality?
I think it's a piece of evidence that explains why P10 only lasted 3 years.
Because they were making really weird decisions like that?
Yeah, I think it was a poor decision. They existed for 4 years, but their decision to shut down was made after 3. And it just took a year to go through the contract. So at that point, they knew that it wasn't working. But I think that was driven more by a desire to be different and to stand out than by an actual coherent choice based on the psychology of viewers.
So they were just doing this because they could and because it was different. Like, it's not the expected thing. Let's hold it.
That's my suspicion. The stated reason that they had was because that would boost the ratings for the season 2 premiere when people were talking about it and they know it's coming up next week. But I think the normal strategy, which maybe they forgot TV history, because in the 50s and 60s, season finales were mostly nothing special. And when they tried doing something special, that got people hyped and excited, and they were much more likely to return for the next season the following year.
And did they have control? As a syndicator, they didn't have control over what order the affiliates showed these in, right?
Well, that they did, but I don't think that it was P10 that had that control, because JMS talks about the fact that even though they finished production on this early enough that it could have aired in August as JMS wanted it to, he didn't want it leaking and word getting out, so they waited until like the day before, or the last moment before they had to submit it to P10 through the satellite, before they submitted it, which they did. And then, if they were doing that regularly, the affiliates would only have the one new episode to pick from, so that would kind of force them to do it in the correct order. In this case, it was a bit of a problem, because not only did P10 lose the uploaded episode, they didn't tell JMS or the production team that they had lost that episode, and they just went into the footage that was in the stores and reassembled it themselves based on the notes, sometimes picking the wrong footage. So there are scenes where there was a CGI hedge maze behind Peter Jurasik while they were filming that were aired with glowing red exit signs and other such errors that made JMS very, very not happy with them.
I would imagine you're jacking up the production of the episode. The entire industry you're in is commercial art, and you're messing up the art and broadcasting anyway.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I was just thinking a big part of syndication or being a syndicated show is typically you don't have control over what the affiliates do with what they broadcast. So I would think the big gamble would be if your episode prior to this wasn't strong enough to make people want to come back for the second season, did you shoot yourself in the foot by not doing the cliffhanger?
They could very well have done that. One of the reasons I had a hard time getting into this, despite the positive reviews the first time around, is that our local affiliate wasn't consistent in the time slot. So it could have been 3 p.m. on a Sunday this week, and then it was aired at 11 p.m. on a Friday next week, and 2 a.m. on a Saturday the week after. It was bouncing everywhere, and I just couldn't keep track of when and where it was going to air.
Shall we get into the episode itself now?
Yeah, I think so.
Yep.
Okay, well, this is, of course, Chrysalis, which was broadcast on Wednesday, October 26, 1994, which is why this episode is coming out on Saturday, October 26, 2024, because after 30 years, Wednesdays turn into Saturdays. The writer is, of course, J. Michael Straczynski. The director, which I had up here a second ago, and is now hiding from me, is Janet Greek, whom we have seen before, and we talked about how she has been coming in for some key episodes. She did the 2-part Voice in the Wilderness, she did Science and Portents, and she did In the Sky Full of Stars, which to my mind are the mythological high points of the season. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. This is the 5th of 14 episodes she's going to direct, with 12 for Babylon 5 and 2 for Crusade that we're going to be talking about.
Okay. So, Janet Greek, we have enjoyed her work in the past. And as far as the plot summary, this episode is kind of detailed. There are, once again, 3 separate plot lines, which are woven together. Only one of them really stands separately. Well, I don't know if I can really make that statement. They are all pretty separate, but the way the storytelling flows, it flows very seamlessly. It feels like it's all, one day in the life.
And what a day.
Yeah, well, 2 days, I guess, because it starts out on December 30th with the 2-part opening. What do they call that before the cold open?
Yeah, the teaser.
Yeah, we have a debate going on in the council meeting room between the Londo Mollari and Jakar because there is a Narn military outpost in Quadrant 37, which I thought Quadrant meant there were only 4, but whatever. Quadrant 37, and it feels like an aggressive move from the Narns, and so the Centauri are very upset, and that sort of sets off the second of the 3 plot lines. Then we cut to Garibaldi. He's out and about doing Garibaldi things when somebody he recognizes, whose name is Petrov, I want to say Stephen Petrov?
Yep.
Runs toward him across the way, is obviously injured. Garibaldi catches him, says, "Hey, what's going on?" Petrov falls in his arms and dies, but not before uttering the words, "Rosebud." No, I'm sorry. Something about they can't kill him. Don't let them kill him. They're going to kill him. And he's like, "Kill who? Kill who?" And Petrov doesn't say, "You mean kill whom?" He just dies. So it must be a Thursday. Never could get the hang of Thursdays. And what this sets up is we hear in background elements, news broadcasts and stuff, the sort of thing that doesn't feel like it's going to be significant, but oh ho ho, it is. The president of Earth is on a goodwill tour through the outer human colonies of the Earth solar system. So he's in this really cool looking ship that has like a parabolic dish flying perpendicular to the path. So it's like, it's sort of like a flower, only circular. Anyways, he's going to go visit. He's visiting the Mars colony. He's heading out toward Io. There's a jump gate there or something like that. And it's just, kind of neat. He's going to make a speech about relations between humans and alien cultures and, all the good things that are happening with that. As Garibaldi is investigating the death of his friend Petrov, we find out that Petrov was, he had kind of a sketchy past. He had been in trouble in the past, but he was getting his life together. And one of the things he was doing to sort of help rectify some past wrongs is he was an informant to Garibaldi about stuff that was happening in Down Below. Garibaldi investigates. He finds out that, we find out that one of the aspects of working in Down Below is that you just take jobs as they come. It's not always good work. It's not always nice work, but it's better than scrounging. And Garibaldi finds out from someone in Down Below that Petrov had been he had recently taken a job from a man whose name is also written down, Devereaux, Edgar Devereaux. And after working for Devereaux, he continued to kind of hang out around him, which this guy finds odd. We as the viewer can conclude that maybe he was gathering information because he's an informant to Garibaldi. But the last time this guy saw Petrov is when he went to go looking for Garibaldi, and he was very upset about stuff. So Garibaldi decides to go find Edgar Devereaux. Edgar Devereaux's up in the Zocalo, and Garibaldi confronts him, and Devereaux's like, "Okay, you know what? You are in stuff that is way over your head." Garibaldi's like, "Whatever, I'm scared, let's go." And he arrests them, Devereaux and his 2 men. Later, as the other plots are unfolding, in fact, this is a neat little tiny point that doesn't really feed into anything else, but Jeffrey Sinclair and Catherine Sakai, remember her? She was his long-lost love who came back to the station, and they've been seeing each other periodically, but she has her own business that takes her away from the station a lot. She and Sinclair have been continuing their romance, and it's been very nice for them both. In fact, Sinclair asks Catherine, well, do you want to get married or don't you? And she says yes. And he's like, do you want some coffee? And she says no, because it's snuggle time for Jeffrey and Catherine. So that night, Thursday night, the December 30th, they're having dinner with Ivanova and Garibaldi. And they ask Garibaldi to be the best man and Ivanova to be the maid of honor, which they both delightfully say yes. And then Garibaldi gets a call that Edgar Devereaux has disappeared from his cell. Poof, he's gone. His 2 henchmen have gone with him. So as Garibaldi's investigating this, he runs across... Actually, he decides to go check out the cargo that Devereaux was handling. It's supposed to be medical supplies that he was transporting. Oh, no. Not medical supplies, weapons. In fact, weapons that have their serial numbers have never even been applied. So they weren't even sawed off. So this is the kind of weapon that's only Earth Force security or like really, really high-level stuff in order for this weapon to exist. So as Garibaldi starts to put 2 and 2 together, Devereaux's smuggling weapons. He finds a transmitter that is tuned to the frequency of the president's like special frequency. He's like, oh no, they're going to assassinate the president. So he makes a call to Sinclair. He runs off to meet with Sinclair, and his assistant, who is looking at all of this stuff, shoots him in the back. So turns out his assistant is in on all of this. And Garibaldi is basically off the page for the rest of the episode. He has been injured. He is in the hospital, and he's not doing well. Sinclair puts 2 and 2 together on what Garibaldi was probably wondering about. He goes to the CNC, turns on the news. He tries to, but he can't get in touch with the, they don't call it Air Force One. Is it Earth Force One? Is that the president's ship?
Earth Force One, yeah.
Earth Force One. He can't get in touch with them. All of the signals are being jammed. He tries going through civilian channels. If I can call the news networks and tell them, maybe they can get through. But while they're trying, the news broadcast shows that the president's ship explodes. Now, if I can rewind this plotline just a little bit, one of the broadcasts we heard along the way was that the vice president had some medical concerns that required that he beg off of the trip. He had to leave the trip partway through for some sort of medical concern. But now the ship has blown up, and guess who's in place to take over? The vice president is sworn in as the new president of Earth, and his first speech to the people is that in these trying times it's important that we pay closer attention to our people's concerns. Sinclair reports all of these things to his higher-ups, and the person he's talking to has no truck with it. She does not want to hear anything about a plot to assassinate the president. As far as she's concerned, as far as all of her experts on their end are concerned, it was a natural mechanical fault, and no suspicion is warranted. Along the way, Edgar Devereaux and his 2 men are also killed, and it is very strongly implied that the man who tried to kill or shot in the back Garibaldi also killed them. But since they're the ones who are under the most suspicion for killing Garibaldi, the other officers in security decide to agree with the cover-up. They're not going to let it be known that this man killed them because obviously they were bad dudes and they tried to kill Garibaldi, so blah, blah, blah. So that's the main plot line. That's sort of our macro plot level. Things are changing on a political level. We then have the Narn Centauri situation, where the Narns are sort of getting their back up against the Centauri. Because if y'all recall, used to be the Centauri were the overlords, the abusers, the bullies, and they were, mistreating the Narns. And the Narns were this peaceful agrarian culture. And since that time, like in the last 100 years, I think the tables have turned. The Centauri Empire is in decline. I kind of get Fall of Russia vibes from it. And the Narn civilization is on the rise and have become much more aggressive militarily, specifically toward the Centauri. So neither party is happy with the other one right now, and the fact that the Narns have put this outpost is a bad thing. So that's the setup. Sinclair tries to talk to Jacquard. He's like, hey, why don't you give the Centauri, some grace here, benefit of the doubt? This is a crossroads. You have a choice right now of what your people are going to do. Do you want to turn into the new bullies, or do you want to respond with, peaceful overtures? And it almost seems like G'Kar is listening to Sinclair. But Londo Mollari gets a call from Morden. Remember him from Signs and Portents? He was the mysterious stranger who was asking everybody what they want. And he talked to Mollari about how Mollari wanted the return of Centauri power and strength, and for himself to be involved in it and high up in it. Yeah, so he's like, hey, Londo, what's going on? And Londo's like, not a lot, Morden. How are you? Morden says, I hear you got a problem. He's like, yes, I do. I can take care of it for you. Oh, yeah? What will that cost me? There's no price. Just one of these days I may ask you to do a favor for me. Maybe the day will come, maybe it won't. And so Morden godfathers his way off to take care of the problem for Londo. He tells Londo to take all the credit, tells Londo to tell his higher-ups that he is personally resolving the Quadrant 37 situation. We cut to Quadrant 37, and a ship that looks very much like the ship from the 2009 Star Trek film, the big Romulan spiky thing. We saw this ship before in Signs and Portents. It blows up the Narn outpost. Not only blows up the outpost, blows up all the escort ships guarding it, basically murders and eradicates 10,000 of the Narn people. Londo is shocked and appalled to hear this news. But Morden's like, yeah, but what does it matter? They're your sworn enemies, right? And now all of the higher-ups, all the people in power are talking about your name. So, be a little grateful. And at the end of the episode, we see Na'Toth get a call from G'Kar. G'Kar has left the station. He has suspicions about what happened. He's going to investigate them. At one point earlier in the episode, he ruled out all of the powers in play. The Centauri wouldn't do it. They don't have enough strength. The Minbari don't care. Humans wouldn't do it. So what's going on? He has suspicions. He has left the station. He tells Na'Toth to tell Sinclair he's right. This was a crossroads, and now there's no turning back. Dun, dun, dun. So that brings us to the third plot line, which we have seen scenes of Delenn throughout the season building something with colored plastic pieces. We don't know what they are, but she finishes it in this episode. It's sort of a pyramidal structure, more like a triangular structure, a 2D triangle with enough thickness to stand up straight. And she's building this. We don't know what it is, but Lanier is very concerned. What if you're wrong? Then speak well of me when I'm gone. We're fulfilling a prophecy here. She goes to Sinclair, and to Sinclair she says, do you recognize this? And she holds up a small triangle, maybe 3 inches across, that has like a gem of some sort suspended in it. We get a flashback to Sinclair's memories of his time on the Minbari ship during the Battle of the Line. That time whenever he was mysteriously captured, he has vague memories of it, and suddenly Minbari didn't want to fight anymore. And he saw people with hoods, and he saw someone hold up this triangle. He's like, yes, I recognize that. And she's like, aha, you do remember what happened at the Battle of the Line. You do remember going on our ship. And he's like, yeah, but just bits and pieces. I don't really know what it all means. She's like, I need to talk to you. And he's like, yeah, but there's the whole thing with Garibaldi right now. She's like, okay, fine. Come talk to me soon. But don't take too long. Things have been set in motion, and I don't have a lot of time. One thing I should have mentioned is that early in the Delenn plotline, she asked Lanier if Lanier had conveyed her question to Ambassador Kosh. And Lanier says, yes. Did you convey it word for word? Yes. And what did he say? And Lanier has the most dramatic possible way of saying he said yes. He's like, he only uttered a single syllable word. He said, yes. And Delenn's like, oh, I'll be right back. So she goes to see Kosh, and she's like, Kosh, I have to see it. And so Kosh's helmet lifts up. We cut away. We hear energy sounds as his helmet lifts up. We hear what sounds to me like flapping of wings, like Kosh is secretly a dragon who flies around the room. I don't know. But Delenn is like, wow, okay, cool. So you're never going to see me again as I am now. And she leaves. And so she takes the triangle that she showed Sinclair, she puts it on top of her structure, and the structure lights up and starts creating this fibrous stuff in the corner of the room. And so she's like, Sinclair better get here quickly or it's going to be too late. Sinclair doesn't get there quickly because of the whole Garibaldi thing. In fact, Sinclair is sitting at the end of the episode after the president has died, and Kosh is like, and so it begins. By the way, you forgot something. Sinclair's like, oh crap, Delenn! He runs off to see Delenn, and Delenn has been encased in a fibrous chrysalis. And Lanier is upset. We saw him crying about this. We don't know what the chrysalis is. We don't know why or how or what. We did hear the word chrysalis a few episodes ago, which we're going to talk about later. But that basically wraps up the 3 plot lines. A very detailed episode. I didn't want to leave anything out because I feel like, so many things contributed to the progress of stuff. But did I miss anything? Was there anything that I missed in the episode?
I wouldn't say missed. I would point out that Natoth did not get a call from Jakar at the end. Her voice print activated a pre-recorded message. So she does not necessarily have any way to communicate directly with Jakar at this point.
Right. It was not a 2-way communication. It was a 1-way communication. Right. Okay.
The only other thing is there is a small, I'm going to call it clip, John, of Morden talking to two. There are 2 people or 2 things there, but they almost have like a version of like the Predator camouflage thing going on to where they're more kind of like ripples. And he kind of ominously does the Malari will be perfect for our needs. He'll do what we need when the time comes.
And I think from the previous episode, we associated Morden with the idea of the shadows. So I'm going to guess that these are 2 of the shadows, capital S.
And again, that is John's guess. As a first-time viewer, this is going to be neither confirmed nor denied at this point until it's confirmed or denied on screen. Because we like to be first-time viewer-friendly, too. Yes.
So that is the episode. So I'm going over to the MDib page for this episode. There weren't... So Catherine Sakai is back. So she would count as one of our guest stars. And normally we would talk about how many episodes she's been in, but I feel like that's a sensitive conversation at this point. Or how many episodes she's going to have been in.
Yeah, we'll say that this is her 3rd episode. So she previously appeared in episodes 5 and 6, which were originally intended to be spaced out a bit, but they moved up Mind War episode 6 because they were so happy with it.
And Julia Nixon continues to delight. Sinclair very fumblingly goes through the proposal, but she does not care. She is hungry for this to have happened. And as he's building up to it, you can see the anticipation on her face that she thinks she knows what this is. And when she says yes, it's like, this is everything I wanted and more. Yes, we're doing this. And I loved her portrayal in that scene.
Yeah. Yeah, it's well done.
We also have, let's see, as far as significance, I guess Edward Connery as Devereaux would be important. But I'm looking at his list, and he's known for Babylon 5. He showed up in an episode of Lost as an auctioneer. He has like maybe a dozen credits to his name. He is on 2 Babylon 5 episodes, but I don't know if he plays the same character or another in the second one. So it's possible that Devereaux shows up again. But other than that, I don't really know him from anything.
Actually didn't open his tab. I've got a bunch of others open. Because, yeah, he doesn't even have an IMDb profile pic at this point.
No. Who does, though, is Garibaldi's aide, played by Macaulay Bruton. And he has one of those faces that looks like he would have been considered very, very much a sex icon kind of performer in like the late 80s to early 90s. He just kind of got that look to him with the hair and the eyebrows and everything. But he has, count them, 4 acting credits. Fire and Rain, Knots Landing, Politics or Murder, and his 6 episodes of Babylon 5.
Yes, and while we have seen him before, we are not up to number 6 yet.
No. In fact, I was looking to see, we saw him in Mind War, we saw him in The Sky Full of Stars, we saw him in By Any Means Necessary, and we saw him in Eyes. Although in Eyes, he's credited as Tragedy.
Yeah, in that one, there was the dream sequence with the comedy and tragedy masks, and he was the actor in the tragedy mask, which was...
You mentioned that at the time that they just pulled somebody irregular. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
A regular extra.
And I pulled that out, but putting him in the role as Tragedy was actually intended to foreshadow this moment.
Oh, even though we didn't see his face, having that character in that mask was important. Interesting.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned it.
Yeah, he's one of the characters I'd most be interested in following from a cliffhanger perspective from this to whatever comes next. Because I thought there were very overt ways in which they showed his true colors, but but most of it I found really subtle. I didn't twig right away when he was the one who called and said, hey, Devereaux and his guys mysteriously disappeared. And then there's the scene right before he shoots Garibaldi to where he's doing a great job of playing dumb, right? So like Garibaldi's like, oh, look at these. And he's like, I don't know what those are. Oh, these are transmitters. Look and see if you can tell what frequency it's set to. I can't make it out. And then Garibaldi like reads the frequency off and figures things out.
With apparently no trouble whatsoever.
Right? So, there was a point where I was like, is this guy Babylon 5's like Barney Fife and I've just missed it? That he he just misses everything to make Garibaldi look better. But the second he shot him in the back, it was like, aha. So, and like you mentioned in your synopsis, John, is everybody else complicit or are they just scared when they decide to go along with Jax? Yeah, I totally got overpowered by these guys and then heroically shot them while they tried to get away.
Yeah, I like that they used a face that we had seen before. It does harken back, and this is coincidental that this is a show we've mentioned umpteen times on this, just another show that happens to have a similar thing that also happens to have a station in space, But it does remind me of the thing in Deep Space Nine where O'Brien got a new assistant in the last handful of episodes before the finale, and then she was instrumental in the finale because she was the one who was manipulated by Vedic Wynn into trying to assassinate, I want to say, the other Vedic, maybe the commander, I forget who now. But, redheaded Bajoran assistant, she was just in one or two episodes before that finale, and then she was used in that finale directly. And so having his character set up and sprinkled in throughout the season with the intent of using him here, I like that.
And
instead of just we didn't have to have seen him before for the episode to have worked, but having seen him before just made it feel organic.
Yeah. And way back in The Gathering, we had there's actually 3 characters that were set up to be regular cast members who we have not seen since. And one of them was Takashima, the operations officer. And we pointed out that, yes, when they got into quarters that they shouldn't have gotten into, they used her credentials, and they never found the ship that was attached on the outside when she was on shift. And there was something to that. Had that character continued on the series with, this is the character that was moved off station and replaced with Commander Ivanova, or Lieutenant Commander Ivanova. At this point, she would have been involved. JMS hadn't decided if she would pull the trigger or just give the order, but she would have had that role in his shooting.
So Takashima would have been one of the culprits involved here had her character continued forward?
That's correct.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And it works well for the scene because it makes sense that Garibaldi might have been having this conversation with the number 2 of the station, like doing this investigation with her. Side note, I feel like we haven't seen much of Ivanova the last few episodes, and this is another episode where she's barely in it. So I don't know if that mattered or if there was something going on with Claudia Christian at the time. But it's interesting that Takashima might have ended up being involved.
I suspect in this case it is just because the episode was largely outlined before they knew about the cast replacement, and Ivanova didn't slide into that role because she didn't have that plot line going.
I think what we've seen of Ivanova, it doesn't really fit. Like, that doesn't really work for her.
Well, and I find that really interesting. So, you guys have probably already talked about it a little bit, but a syndicated series with a mapped out 5-year plan was an anomaly at this point in television, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, a TV series with any kind of overarching continuing narrative was an anomaly at the time. Everything's episodic still in 1994.
you had small bits of serialization or continuity, but at best it was confined to a season, right? And seasons would typically reset. And I don't want to spoil anything. I know we're trying to keep it first viewer friendly, but there have been a lot of interviews to where, JMS said that he had what he would call trapdoors. I have trapdoors for every character because you never know what's going to happen. I find it interesting that he had this character that he introduced in the pilot that he had plans for. For whatever reason, it didn't work out with that actress, so they introduce a new character. And he doesn't just graft his plans for character A onto character B.
Right. Yeah, he doesn't just substitute somebody else and keep on going with the same idea. Basically, new face, new name, same character. He brings in a new character. We have talked about that some before.
Yeah, so Takashima's, the major plot lines I can think of for her were actually split amongst 3 different characters on the series. So there is Ivanova, there's Garibaldi's aide, and there's a third one whom we've met, but it's spoilery to name that character now, so I won't.
To put it in context, and this is to sort of deliberately compare to where else we are on TV right now, this should have been broadcast at the end of the first season of the show. As it happens, it's broadcast leading into the second season. And so also on the air at this time was the beginning of the third season of Deep Space Nine, which Deep Space Nine viewers may know is the end of the second season. Is where we met the Jem'Hadar, and then we meet the founders at the beginning of the third season with the changelings. So the sort of thing that defines Deep Space Nine's continuing narrative and continuing arc through the rest of the series also starts right now. That kind of storytelling wasn't done before this. It's still very much a new thing and I would lay down money that Straczynski's plans for Babylon 5 far outstretch the actual plans that had been laid at this point for the Deep Space Nine series.
Ira Steven Behr was taking over as showrunner on Deep Space Nine with season 3, and he would agree with that.
Yeah. Which is not to say that one is necessarily better than the other. Deep Space Nine played out their next 5 years with aplomb. But what had been decided and planned at this point, I think Straczynski would have a taller stack of paper.
Yeah. For comparison, there's a major reveal coming for Julian Bashir in about season 6 about his history. Mm-hmm. And that was decided as they were filming as they're doing pre-production on the episode. The first draft of the script did not include that. Whereas that's the kind of thing in Babylon 5, it would have been known before they started filming. It would have been foreshadowed, and the consequences would have been planned out more thoroughly.
Or at the very least, would not have been directly contradicted by earlier developments and use of the character.
Yes, when you have an episode where a telepathic alien is uncovering every deep dark secret he has, and then 3 seasons later you find out a deep dark secret that's his biggest deep dark secret that wasn't even hinted at.
Right. We haven't even gone through all of the other names, but the others are pretty small in the episode. Liz Burnett played the Lurker, so when Garibaldi is down in not underground or underworld, down below, she sort of razzes him for only caring about them whenever one of his rats, basically, is in trouble. Cheryl Frances Harrington plays the senator at the end who tells Sinclair to basically F off because nothing that he's saying about the president being assassinated is worth listening to, which, I could be wrong, to me strongly implied that she knew exactly what was going on and didn't want anyone else talking about it because she directly orders him not to have this conversation.
Well, it's not just that. It was, there's no way your stupid little security chief could have tumbled on this big conspiracy that Earth Force missed.
Yeah, but that kind of hyperbolic talk and the fact that she ordered him to stay silent about it, I don't know, I took both of those as, I know what's going on and I'm not going to let you mess us up.
One of the things that struck me that I had forgotten about was that in my mind...
There's a hole in your mind.
Thank you. In my mind, Sinclair's role as commander of the station was to kind of be like the secretary of the UN, which he was, but he was also the Earth delegate to the council. He was an ambassador himself, so technically he's supposed to push forward the agenda that Earth Force wants him to push forward in the council.
Mm-hmm.
And she's giving him that agenda.
Yeah.
And I don't even recognize Maggie Egan as Jane. Do we know who that was in the show?
That was the news anchor. The one
the broadcaster, yes. And Mark Hendrickson as a Narn pilot who had like one line in the scene where Quadrant 37's outpost gets destroyed. So those are all of our guest cast. And we've already had some episode discussion along the ways, which is great. So we're sort of already in the League in Session segment, which we never introduce as a League in Session segment. But hey, now it's time for the segment we call League in Session. We're going to give our discussions and thoughts about the episodes. So, Trey, you're the guest. What did you think about this episode?
I really liked it.
You can give general thoughts, but you can also give detailed thoughts, and we'll just sort of respond to your detailed thoughts as we go along.
Sure. I was going to say I really liked it, and you can tell that this is a game changer episode. My only thing is I found the title a little curious. Maybe the Chrysalis and the change with whatever change Delen's undergoing becomes a big thing. But for that to be the title of the episode, I felt like that was the most minor plot piece of the episode.
I was trying to read it as a metaphor for everything else that's going on. Like, yes, it's directly applicable to Delen in a literal sense. But, like, the stuff with Earth, we are undergoing a change. Things are happening. And similarly, especially with Jakar heading off into space at the end, I feel like whatever's going on with the Centauri and the Narns and the Shadows, this is something big that is starting and changing and happening now. So I feel like Chrysalis is sort of a metaphor for almost like we've been in one and now the show is coming out of it.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those before and after shows or episodes where if you were watching it, sometimes you could change the order of the episodes. Like we talked about, they bumped up Mind War in the schedule. The only place this episode works is the season 1 finale because so much changes. There are status quo shifts. If we just run through the characters, Sinclair is engaged. Garibaldi is in serious condition. The Delenn, our Minbari ambassador, is in this Chrysalis, which is apparently fulfilling some sort of prophecy. Londo is now, in bed with Mr. Morden and whoever he's working for. Jakar has left the station and is doing an investigation on his own to find out who it was that wiped out Quadrant 37. Kosh is involved in something and has actually revealed his true form to Delenn. Really, Franklin and Ivanova are our only two regulars aside from the assistants like Veer and Lanier and Natoth, all of whom have roles here. It's another reason that they filmed this as number 12 is because people wouldn't always be available over the holiday season. So they got this out in November. But they're all there. Vice President Clark is the new president. And he made his speeches about how he's going to be focusing on human interests more so than aliens as he's taking over.
Which, quick thoughts about the president. So, back when they had the election, I remember being disappointed because I felt like we were being led to believe in the episode that the more progressive candidate, the one that we might, as, free-thinking humans who encourage equality and social justice, might want to take over as leader, lost. And Maurice Santiago, the older, sort of more stayed in his ways person who might be, more of a backwards thinker, won. But since then, we've only heard either neutral or positive things about that president, and yet he is the one who dies, and his even, apparently, less progressive thinker, vice president, takes over. So it's like we lost the good, we had the okay, and now we have the bad.
Yeah, the descriptions that we've had of Clark so far came from Ivanova in that Midnight on the Firing Line, where she feels a leader should have a strong chin, and President Santiago had no chin, and his Vice President Clark, had several. And that to her was not a good combination.
Yeah, it's what if McLean won and then had passed away shortly thereafter.
Yeah. And just as a comment, production realities and symmetries, what JMS clearly remembers from the JFK assassination is not actually the day of the assassination itself. He remembers the funeral, and he remembers Lyndon Johnson being sworn in. So when they were swearing in Clark, they used photo references from that right down to someone with a pink pillbox hat in the shot. So it was deliberately meant to echo it, and coincidentally, that scene happened to be filmed on the anniversary of Lyndon Johnson swearing in.
I felt like it was this very similar shot angle and arrangement of people behind them as the president's swearing in at the beginning of Battlestar Galactica.
They might have been referencing the same elements. I don't know.
You've mentioned that broadcaster a couple of times, John. This reminded me of, like, we're all three comic book guys. You know.
Oh wait, you like comics?
Yeah.
I make podcasts about comics. Did you know?
I had heard that about you. But you know, we all know about Frank Miller's use of the talking heads for like the Dark Knight Returns. This was probably one of the best examples I have seen of it in television. And because of that, this was an episode that I don't think you could multitask and watch, because they did a good job of drawing your attention to it. So it was never mindless noise in the background, but they also normally framed it up in such a way that it wasn't very often, and now the camera zooms in on the television screen, if you will.
Right. It felt more background unnecessary in Midnight on the Firing Line, but at that time you're just getting into the series. You don't really know what to watch for. You don't really know any plot lines or anything. It's just, there's an election going on. People are talking about it. You know, are we supposed to care? We don't know yet. But by this point in the season, there's been enough going on that, yeah, this feels important, or at least feels like, you know, world developments, even if they're very minor world developments. The president's going to go on a goodwill tour. Okay, cool. But like you said, it's very much talking head Frank Miller exposition without stopping everything to look at it. And she continues to play this role throughout the course of the series, which makes me happy, because this is like one of those things. It reminds me of Spawn. Actually, of course, Spawn is taking off on Frank Miller, but like the CNN anchor throughout the course of the Spawn series, or at least the parts of the Spawn series I've read. You know, those three anchors that they have over and over again. There's the CNN anchor, there's the gay fashion anchor, and then there's the outspoken conservative person who keeps on getting fired and having to get shows on other stations.
In fact, with JMS's background in journalism, he has a lot to say about journalism in general, and some of the commentary he's had to go along with the scripts. If he had room in the narrative, that ISN reporter or that anchor would have been stationed on Babylon 5 at some point and become a regular cast member. But
that would have been cool.
Yeah, he just had a hard time working in with all the other plot lines going on. But if the reboot or reimagined series that they're talking about for the CW happens, and at the time of recording, we don't know if it will or not, although by the time this comes out, we will know one way or the other. I would not be surprised if that becomes part of the new show, especially with the just general pop culture talk about journalism and its role in society since then. So I would not be at all surprised if that becomes more prominent in the reimagining. And again, purely speculation on my part. I have no insider knowledge whatsoever aside from what JMS shares on his Patreon, which is that it's not dead, but we don't know for sure that the reboot is alive either.
Yeah, the last update anything about it was in November of 22, and we're recording in January of 23. So will it happen? Will it not? We do not know.
Yeah, at this point, he's expecting we'll know when they announce which shows are going to pilot. So it sounds like they haven't ruled it out, but they might be waiting to see if they might have something better. Again, that interpretation is my speculation. He's just saying not knowing at this point is a good thing, because that probably means it's still on the table. A no would have been a no. So I think that's what they're trying to decide between, is this and whatever else comes across their desks.
Okay, so there's so much in this episode. I feel like we should like pick a plot thread and focus on it for a minute. So where do y'all want to start? Do you want to start with Londo and the Shadows, which is a really weird 90s grunge band? Do you want to start with Dylan's Chrysalis, which is a soap opera that never really got off the ground? Or do you want to start with The Assassination of the President, which is a Tom Clancy novel that came out in the late 90s?
Trey, you choose.
Let's do Londo and the Shadows.
So, my read on that in the synopsis, that's basically accurate, right? Like the Centauri are kind of like the old Russian Empire. They're on the decline. They don't have their old power anymore. They're just basically caught up on the old ways. Whereas the Narns feel almost like, sort of taking cues from the persecution of the Jewish people in the 20th century. But in contrast to that, they have stood up. Well, I say in contrast. I'm not going to get political about Middle East stuff, but the Narn people are fighting back very harshly and strongly and basically taking back what's theirs and maybe beyond that as well.
Yeah, they're the bear that has risen. It's like if you read the Avengers issues from the 1970s that introduced the Mantis as the Celestial Madonna with a very different origin than they have in the Guardians of the Galaxy for her, you will learn that I think it was the Kree were, now I'm blanking on which was which, but the Kree and the Skrull, one was a peace-loving agrarian society until the other came in and took over and enslaved them. And then they rose up.
Yes, I remember that background for them. That was kind of unexpected because we traditionally used to see the Skrulls as the aggressors, but they had actually been the persecuted.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It was the other way around.
No, you've got it right. Because the swerve was the Skrull were introduced first in Marvel Comics, so you had a longer. If you had been following like the Fantastic Four, for example, you had a longer time with them as the bad guys versus the Kree.
And the Kree were introduced right before Captain Marvel's series started in '68.
Yep.
Okay, I thought Ronan the Accuser was earlier than that, but
5 minutes earlier, like Ronan the Accuser, and then there's a Sentry, then there was Ronan, and then like 3 months later is Captain Marvel.
Okay.
But no, I think your read's accurate, John. I've also heard them kind of compared, Narn being India and the Centauri being the British Empire. I've seen people make those parallels as well.
Well, sadly, there are lots of examples of one imperial power persecuting a provincial civilization.
Yeah, I don't think JMS had a specific one in mind. It's a pattern that repeats through history. And people say, "Oh, it's a perfect fit for this," and his response is, when I've seen him on his comments on the message boards that were reprinted. When people say, "Well, it's such a perfect fit for this," that's what you had in mind, right? And he says, "Yeah, and here's 12 others it's a perfect fit for." It's recurring themes in history.
Yeah, so the Indian people, and we could probably figure out lots of others, which is not to downplay any of them, but yeah. We had seen Londo in the Signs and Portents episode being asked what he wants, and I meant to go back and watch that scene, but I didn't get a chance before recording. But I remember him saying that he wanted to see the Centauri rise to power again, be restored to the glory that they had, and I feel like I remember, so I said it, that he specifically mentioned his own involvement in that and his own prestige as well. Is that a false memory, or did he say that?
I don't clearly remember, but I've got the script in hand. I'm trying to find that page where they have the conversation. Here we go. All right, fine. Do you want to know what I want? You really want to know the truth? I want my people to reclaim their rightful place in the galaxy. I want to see the Centauri stretch forth their hand again and command the stars. I want a rebirth of glory, a renaissance of power. I want to stop running through life like a man late for an appointment, afraid to look back, afraid to look forward. I want us to be what we used to be. I want it all back the way it was. Does that answer your question?
Okay, so he didn't specifically mention himself being involved, but I imagine he wouldn't mind either. Because we know that we've heard him in other places in this season bemoan his own lack of stature.
Yeah, he's definitely said it. He just didn't say it in that one specific moment.
Right.
Yeah, he at this point he definitely feels like being the Centauri ambassador is a step down from whatever role he had prior.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
but nibbled to death by cats,
I loved that line. That made me laugh because he's like, "What's this? The animal from Earth that and he's describing a duck. Not best description, but he is definitely describing a duck. And Veer is like, cats. Yes, cats.
Cats. The other thing that I liked, because I didn't have a chance to watch all of the first season up to this point, but I've done like a lot of reading on the Babylon 5 wiki to kind of help me with context and everything. But the treaty that he accuses the Narn of violating was a treaty that was being established in like the first couple of episodes of the season. The Euphrates Treaty.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, that's from Midnight on the Firing Line.
And that's when we saw there was a Centauri station that was attacked by the Narns during the negotiation of that treaty. And that was the one that actually had Londo's nephew on board.
Yes, yeah, his nephew was on the planet. Yeah,
that's right. It was something 3.
Ragesh 3.
The name of it. Ragesh 3. Yes.
Or maybe Euphrates wasn't from Midnight on the Firing Line. No, the Euphrates sector was the one where it ended up being Veer and Natoth doing the final negotiations.
It may have been a protracted thing.
Yeah.
But the Euphrates Treaty, you're right, was Veer and Natoth.
Don't give away the home world.
Yes, because Londo was looking for the woman he loved that had been hired to betray him.
Right, the Danica McKellar character?
No, Danica McKellar she was in love with, that was the Romeo and Juliet ones from Born to the Purple.
Yeah, this was, if you've ever seen the Mark Harmon film Summer School, she was like the foreign exchange student in Summer School.
Yeah. No, we're looking for Born to the Purple.
Right. Well, Born to the Purple was Romeo and Juliet.
The summary on Wikipedia is Londo's career is in jeopardy when a beautiful slave seduces him and steals a sensitive computer file.
Yeah, because they were the Purple Files.
That's right. So I'm thinking of the right episode. I'm just picturing the wrong person in the role.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was so this was episode 3, so it was very early, and it was Fabiana Udenio was the one who played Adira.
That's right.
Yes, and Adira's story is not over, by the way.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And of course, Morden comes along. Now, Morden is the mysterious person that feels like there's a big bad involved there. He has not come off as menacing. He has come off as perfectly genteel the entire time. Super nice guy. Have him over for dinner next week. But I get a vibe. And if you're called the Shadows, that's not usually a good thing. Unless you're just an environmental person who's trying to reshape the world and, get humans out of the way in the process. That's a Ra's al Ghul reference. But anyways, so he is doing stuff with Londo Mollari and elevating the Centauri because he asked him, what do you want? In fact, he asked lots of people, what do you want? So fulfilling their wants, I don't know if that's going to be like a plot line going forward or if he just took a poll and they have chosen Londo. I'm not sure exactly which way this is going to go yet.
I would assume the latter because, I don't remember any of the details of that episode, but, I don't know how you could fulfill both what Jakar wants and Londo wants, as an example. Assuming what Jakar wants would be, the antithesis of what Londo wants.
Yeah, Jakar's answer was much more short-term, where he basically wanted the Centauri wiped out, and after that he didn't care. So he wanted revenge, but he didn't have any grand schemes. And Londo's answer was the one that was most indicative of greater needs. Delenn didn't really answer. She responded to the question with a question, with the "Why are you asking me this question?" Right, and Morden was actively avoiding contact with Kosh.
So Morden was just sampling from the interstellar political 31 flavors of Baskin-Robbins, and then he picked one he liked and went with it.
Yeah.
So we definitely know that his people have power. Of course, we saw that indicated already in Signs and Portents, because there was another situation at the end of that episode where the spiky ship showed up and did some destructive things and then disappeared again. I forget what it destroyed, but it destroyed somebody. Mm-hmm. And that was also an episode, was that the episode where Ivanova went out to investigate stuff and we didn't see what she found and then she just came back to the station?
No, her encounter with the Raiders was earlier in the season. That was the episode where the Raiders were the ones that were wiped out by the Shadows, right?
Okay.
So the Shadows came in, and that's what they destroyed was the Raider mothership, and recovered the eye, which was given to Londo, which is why Morden starts the conversation by asking if the eye is still safe.
Is it secret? Is it safe?
Yeah, just a quick reminder for the viewers of where we'd seen Morden before and what he was involved with.
Yeah, without spoiling where he's going to be, because we don't know. And I'm using the royal we, meaning I don't know. Any other thoughts or points about the Londo, Centauri, Narn, Morden plotline?
Just, I really liked... I feel like Jakar and Londo were probably what got me in the door on Babylon 5 to begin with, and they're the characters that I most kind of glommed onto in this episode. Londo immediately has some buyer's remorse, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't know what he expected, but he did not expect what he got.
Well, for all of his rhetoric about hating the Narns, when it came to actually murdering 10,000 of them at a go, he was aghast. So there's a lot of, like, emotional resentment and hatred, but not a lot of, like, actual desire to see them die. Not when it comes right down to it.
At least not when he can be held responsible for it either.
There's that.
Mm-hmm. And I liked how smart Jakar was. That, not that anybody necessarily tried to, but Jakar didn't get instantly sucked into those damn Centauri or anything. He reasoned, he reasoned it out. This doesn't feel like Earth. Centauri don't have the strength.
Minbari don't care.
Yeah.
Or it's the Vorlons who don't care.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. There's another player out there that we don't know about.
Mm-hmm. And he sets off to find out who they might be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff there. So I feel like the Delenn stuff will probably take a very small amount of time to kind of go through. She mentions, is it Valen, the older Minbari who showed up a couple episodes back? Because she says that he said something, or was right.
Yeah, Valen wasn't the Minbari who showed up a couple episodes ago. He is like the prophet that brought about the current state of Minbari society.
Okay. So she says that he was right. She says she's fulfilling a prophecy, but it feels like one of those sort of, I see this prophecy and I'm going to set out to fulfill it rather than just letting it get fulfilled accidentally the way prophecies are supposed to be fulfilled. I say this as somebody who knows how prophecies are supposed to work. But Lanier is doubtful and realizes that she might die if this goes wrong. But she's been planning this for a while because she's been building this thing for a while. And it has something to do with Kosh. Like, her going into this Chrysalis and deciding to make a change has something to do with the fact that Kosh has done something, maybe gone through a similar change himself. I don't know.
Is this something special, or is this something that any Minbari can do, or is this something that any Minbari can attempt, but if you're not the right one, you die?
It could well be, because, yeah, it's not clear, but it is going to be drastic. There's even a point where things are set up. So we see it starting to spin spin the Chrysalis. And then we had another quick inserted scene of Lanier, very disturbed, and we can hear Delenn almost whimpering in the background.
Right. And the Chrysalis began to spin without her even there, like it was spinning in the corner. So at some point after her conversation with Sinclair, she inserted herself in. Well, no, she didn't even start spinning it until after the conversation with Sinclair because it needed the triangle. But at some point she inserted herself into that corner.
Yeah, and that triangle is the triluminary device that, we first saw in the Sky Full of Stars, but it was shown up, so it was given to her when she refused her promotion with the Great Council a few episodes back, and was what was used to help take Ducat's body, even though that episode aired a little bit earlier because it was meant to be in another sequence.
It was used to help take the Ducat's body.
Yeah, because those episodes were out of sequence, so that is a minor continuity glitch that happened.
Okay, so she should not have had it by the time that episode aired because she hadn't been given it yet by the council.
That's right.
But she did use it. Okay, interesting. All right.
Yeah, but it is that device, and as we learned when it was given to her, that there are 2 more.
We don't usually get dates shown explicitly in the episodes, but I have seen websites where people have laid this show out on a timeline with calendar dates. And in case anybody was wondering, I couldn't get the hang of Thursday's joke earlier, it's because December 30th, 2258 will in fact be a Thursday.
Yeah, and maybe you guys can educate me. I was using as a source the Babylon 5 wiki, and they have a broadcast order and then a chronological order for the episodes. So were episodes broadcast out of order in which they were intended to see, or is that fans like trying to kind of reverse engineer star dates and put things in order based off of clues in the episodes?
There's only been 2 cases this season, according that JMS has mentioned in the notes for episodes being aired out of the intended order. And we mentioned them both today, actually. So one of them was Mind War. It aired as episode 6, but it was intended as episode 10, although it didn't break anything from continuity to be aired in that order. It's just that the network was really happy with that episode, which introduced Bester, and wanted to air it sooner rather than later to help establish a strong audience early in the series. And the other one was Legacies. So, well, actually, Legacies in Babylon Squared. So it's really Babylon Squared. That was the one where they meet the time-traveling Babylon 4 station. That aired as episode 20, but was intended as episode 17. So that's when Delenn got the Triluminary from the Grey Council. And we also flash back, and that was where we should have been introduced to Lise Hampton, Garibaldi's ex-girlfriend.
Because her suspected death played into the other episode that aired before but should have aired after.
Yeah, so if Babylon Squared was bumped to 17, Legacies, when Delenn's group used the Triluminary device to recover Ducat's body, would have been the episode after. And then we'd have had the 2-part Voice in the Wilderness when Lisa's fate was something that was preeminent in Garibaldi's mind. And we would have already been known who she was. So that's the only out of sequence that made continuity errors. I've seen other continuities, but a lot of them are because most shows, the production order is the intended broadcast order, so some people sort it by then, but then this would have been episode 12 out of 22. And I think we can all agree that the way this ends,
Right.
We have not seen another episode that can follow immediately after this without people going, wait, what happened?
Right.
And there's a 2-part Voyager episode where the second part has a earlier production order than the first part. So that's what I was saying at the very beginning. Sometimes the scripts are assigned production numbers, but aren't necessarily the order in which the episodes are finished, so to speak, but more like the order in which they're begun. But, that's probably a case-by-case, series-by-series, creator-by-creator situation.
Yeah, there's cases of that in the X-Files too. There's an episode that was intended to be aired third in the 5th season of the X-Files that was aired third in the 5th season of the X-Files, but it was the first to be produced for that season because some of the location shooting needed one extremely specific location. It was season 6. But there was one very, very specific location that was required, and it was only available at a certain time. So that episode had to be filmed before anything else that season.
So, going back to the Delenn plotline, it seems that this is definitely an element in a series of elements, but it also brings in questions that we do not know the answers to yet because it's setting up new ideas. There's a prophecy, which her prophecy and what Valen said was right are probably referring to the same thing. And then we don't know what this chrysalis is that Delenn's going into.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you mentioned it, John. Seeing in Kasha's suit, that's supposed to be a big deal at this point, right?
Mm-hmm. I would think so.
Yeah, she is now the 3rd character who's seen Kosh without his suit. The other 2 both saw him without the suit in The Gathering, so the pilot movie before Midnight on the Firing Line, and both of those characters were transferred off station.
The previous Doctor and who else?
Lita Alexander, the first telepath,
That's right.
Then, she was reassigned, and then Talia Winters came in as the station telepath after that.
But that doctor said that what he saw was horrible and ugly. And Delenn did not have that reaction when she saw him. So it makes me wonder at least, why there's a difference there. And I actually was wondering if whatever change, because again, I took this scene between Delenn and Kosh as she's going to go off and undergo a change, which she's only going to do because she's gotten reassurance from Kosh. She sees him after an implied change as well. So if that change, if I'm reading that right, did that happen before, a long time ago? Or has it happened since not Franklin, because it's the other doctor, since the other doctor saw him? Anyway, just things I wasn't sure of.
Yeah, Ben Kyle had I don't remember him saying that what he saw was ugly, but it made him question everything, and he says his life was changed in that moment.
Okay.
So we will, but yeah, it's we don't know exactly what either of them saw.
So that gets us to the main plot line, which we've already had a bit of discussion. It's kind of a longer episode anyway, but it's kind of expected because A, it's the finale, and B, there are three of us, not two. But now the main plot line with the Petrov dying, Garibaldi, the assistant turning against them, the president dying at the end. Lots of things going on here. And we shouldn't leave off Jeff and Catherine getting engaged.
The only two weak parts to me both kind of came from this thread. One was, and I guess it was to give Claudia Christian something to do, because like you mentioned, she's barely in this episode at all. But I was like, do you not know anybody else on the station that, you're immediately going to go to the two co-stars as your best man and maid of honor? And then, while I liked Garibaldi piecing everything together, I don't know why they were running those things through Babylon 5. Like, it's not... I know it's the only surviving, Babylon station, but it's not, the only station out there, right? Would it have been, closer to Io's to where that would have been, a chain and getting the parts there, or...
There didn't seem to be any direct connection between the stuff that Garibaldi found that said, hey, we're going to assassinate the president, and the actual assassination of the president. Those didn't seem to be actually directly connected, unless there's an element that I'm missing.
Well, there was some of it, because only one crate was left behind, so they had more of the same gear that was shipped.
Okay.
So to answer Trey's question, I didn't see a clear answer on screen, but I have been, sort of my headcanon is that the point of manufacture was outside of the Earth solar system. So Babylon 5 was the intermediate station en route.
Okay.
And I have a no prize, if you will, for the Catherine thing. I don't think Catherine knows anybody on this station. I think everyone on the station whom she knows through Sinclair. And so Jeff's two best friends on this station are Michael and Susan. And so I imagine they probably had a conversation before the dinner about who the best man and maid of honor would be. And Catherine's like, I have no idea. And Jeff's like, well, why not Susan? And so that's why they invited those two to dinner and asked them about it.
Okay. And that's probably me missing context and having watched all of the first season. With the dialogue, I knew that they had an on-again, off-again relationship, but I didn't know that she was relatively new to the station, so to speak.
Yeah, the first time we see her is in episode 5, Parliament of Dreams, and they were in the off-again stage of their relationship, and that's revealed. Had she known he was commander of the station, she wouldn't have taken the commission, right? She came there for her business.
Because she's avoiding him at that time.
Yeah. So she would not have come had she known he was commander, which supports John's idea that she doesn't know anyone else. The only person we've seen her had an extended conversation with, I think, is Jakar. Oh, and Talia Winters was part of the negotiation, but again, that was strictly business, so they probably didn't really know each other. The only one she had any in-depth conversation with was Jakar, and he's not really maid of honor material.
He's maid of honor. Jakar's a Narn people. The Narns are very honorable. This plot line was something I mentioned earlier, may have been in the off-mic conversation, as something that sort of sets the storytelling choices in this series apart from a lot of other shows I've experienced, especially from this era. And that is that the good guys lose at the end. They don't succeed in stopping the president's death. And I kind of expected they would. Like, literally until the ship exploded, I expected that they were going to get through and avert disaster, because that's what happens on our TV shows. Not as much now, because I think shows have gone a lot more postmodern. There's a lot more situations where things like this, get inverted. But I don't know. Do y'all agree? Would the expected storytelling turn at the end be the opposite of what we actually got?
I don't know, because one of the things that I think was refreshing about Babylon 5 is, in a lot of ways, you can see a through line between Babylon 5 and like the revamped Battlestar Galactica, in that it's science fiction, but it's not as forward looking necessarily maybe as Star Trek. So like when you think about it within the parameters of the universe that they've set up, they don't have any ships that can get there fast enough. There's nothing that can like warp 9, right? There's no kind of TMAT transporter technology. And I think they fairly carefully laid out, like, here are the transmitters, and their job is to burst static on all of the frequencies so you can't get through. So it is unique for television at this time. And I think they played by all the rules of the universe, so I think it works.
No, I definitely think it works. I just was surprised.
Yeah, one of the things that's going to be becoming more and more clear with Babylon 5 is there's a conscious choice to set up cliched storylines and then go a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
So it does it as consistently as actually the Rockford Files used to do. That was one of the reasons that was so popular. It liked to defy conventions. So if someone came to beat up Jim Rockford and say, "Get off the case," his response would be, "Okay, I'm off. Bye. Done."
Yeah, no. Now, as soon as 2 or 3 years from now, John, I think they would have done the same thing. But if this was a Next Gen or a Deep Space Nine episode, Riker or Worf or Cisco are teleporting in just in the nick of time to jump and knock the president out of the way of the phaser blast.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And Deep Space Nine, like you said, might not do that in a couple of years, but pre-1994, yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about.
Yeah, and again, in Trek with the assassination, they would only take out the target. They wouldn't take out the entirety of Earth Force One.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because, yeah, the entire ship and possibly its escort and entourage got destroyed.
Yeah, so again, in my headcanon, in I think it was Survivors, the Mark Scott Zickery episode, we saw that the president's chief of security was someone whom Garibaldi had known in the past. And that character does not return. My headcanon is this is why she was on Earth Force One.
So when you think about that, the death toll in this episode is pretty staggering.
Yeah, the president himself is the one that's going to cause a shift in the status quo for the world they live in. But yeah, the 10,000 Narn, another big chunk of humans. This is the biggest death toll we have seen so far. And things tend to escalate when you have 4 more years of the show.
A planned 4 more years, not just, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Other than the things I've already said, where the vice president looks like an unhappy turn for the future, and the ending being counter to expectations, I don't know what else I have to say about this except for my last best hope comes from this plotline.
Okay, well, why don't you tell us your last best hope, the standout character or character moment then?
So, for those who are new to the show, or for Trey, since you haven't actually heard the show yet, because we haven't actually released any episodes yet, we have a segment called The Last Best Hope, where if there is a character or a moment in the show that stands out to you, maybe something, a takeaway kind of thing, what would that be? So, since I've already hinted at mine, I'll go ahead and say, I'm a sucker for getting choked up. If an episode is going to choke me up, I'm going to remember that moment. And, I'm already starting to feel it. In the proposal dinner, whenever Garibaldi and Ivanova and Sakai and Sinclair are all sitting together, and Jeff and Catherine ask Michael and Susan to be their significant wedding party members. Michael Garibaldi has come through a lot, and we know a lot more about that now than we did at the beginning of the series. He is only in the good place in life that he's in right now because of his friendship with Jeffrey Sinclair. And so whenever he says in that dinner, "I've always been proud to be your friend," that got me. And it's kind of one of those things that I want someone out there to feel about friendship with me. It's like, that was a good moment for them. And for the overall episode, it's inconsequential, tangential, and not even directly related to anything. But for those characters, it was a good moment. Anyways, that's me. Trey, anything stand out for you in your memory?
Londo.
It can be a character in general, or it can be a specific moment. It doesn't have to be a specific moment, though.
I'm just going to say Londo in general. Yeah, I'm purposefully trying to be spoiler free. I think it's safe to say that we can all say that this was an important episode. It's an important episode for Londo, so he stood out for me based off of some of what I know is coming.
And even not knowing what's coming specifically for me, I can tell that this is setting up big moving and changing going forward for Londo. This is a course change for him. I can see that.
It is. And that Londo and Jakar are tied together. We've heard Londo say before, his species can dream about the way they are going to die. And he has dreamed that he is going to die because he and Jakar choke each other to death. And Londo and Jakar, we know they are intertwined. And for my last best hope, I'm doing the flip side of that coin. I am picking Jakar, and specifically the moment where he says, as you went through, he's deducing what's going on, saying the humans didn't do this. The Centauri don't have the strength. The Vorlons don't care. And running through them all and realizing there's a new player. Because that realization is a turning point for Jakar.
And if I can add to your last best hope, his apparent takeaway from the conversation with Sinclair, where Sinclair is like, this is a crossroads. What are you going to do? Jakar looks like he's almost willing to say, okay, let's maybe make be the bigger person in a conflict with the Centauri. Don't react according to pattern. And then the outpost gets destroyed, and that option is taken away from him because now something else is going on. In other words, I really like Jakar's turn in this as well.
What I find interesting, and I'll just say this, John, is when you guys pitched this to me, in my mind thought of Babylon 5, which I admit I hadn't thought about in a while. My mind instantly went Jakar, Londo, and Garibaldi. Those were the three characters that I instantly recalled and went back to.
Well, good.
I was asked once to come up with a list of the 5 television characters that have the most growth and the most change in the course of their series. And those 3 that Trey just named made the list.
Yeah.
There's so much more in store. I was hesitant to name names when I mentioned the conversation. I think when we were talking about The Gathering with Paul. But no, I think we're far enough along now that we can see some of what's ahead for at least Londo and Jakar.
And with Garibaldi, a lot of what we've seen so far has been establishing where he is and why. So, the idea that he will change going forward, they've had to take time to establish what he's changing from.
Yeah. One of the nice things about having a planned series is that there's not just things that these characters are going to do that's planned. There are arcs. I don't think there is a single character whose status quo is the same the last time we see them as it was the first time we see them.
I have not seen the new Willow series, but someone online posted the first and last time we see the characters from Willow. And you can just tell that from whatever's going on with those characters, some of them, they have had a day between the beginning of that series and the end. And I expect similar things from this show as well.
Yep. There's definitely some changes coming.
So that brings us to giving form to the dream. Now, before we get into this, for those who know the show, we are specifically not talking about transition between the finale of season 1 and the premiere of season 2. We'll talk more about that next week. But just what we know about this episode and what is teasing about the future. And again, we're not spoiling the future, but we're just like putting a pin in things that you might want to pay attention to as a first-time viewer. So the entire episode, right?
Yeah, there is nothing here that does not matter.
Which was true with Science and Portents, right? Like there was 17 seconds of screen time that didn't have consequence.
I think actually it was 17 frames of screen time.
Everything in this episode is setting up future developments and future crossroads. And, that's why I wanted to, slightly and respectfully disagree with you, Trey, about the Chrysalis ideas, because I feel like that is basically encapsulating the episode as a concept. But are there any particular things that you want to mention, Blaine or Trey?
I'm going to call it the second conversation between Morden and Londo.
The second one in this episode, or the fact that this is their second encounter?
The second one in this episode.
Which is after the...
After the outpost is destroyed. I think that is especially important. The message that Jakar leaves for Natash, you were speaking of character arcs just a second ago. Blaine, his confidence in her is they've come far from when she first arrived on the station in their relationship. So I'd put a pin in that as well.
Yeah, those are big. We've got the Chrysalis, which was alluded to a few weeks ago, that Delenn is in.
What did we say a few weeks ago about Chrysalis? I remember that word coming up, but I don't remember anything about it that would hint at this.
So the emergent telepath, when she was trying to decide which of the alien races she would go with, what her fate was going to be, she could tell that when she saw the word Chrysalis in Delenn's mind, Delenn shut her down and shut her out immediately. So she was trying to hide that idea.
Okay.
And that's all we know. And she didn't know what the word meant because she was a young teen. And it was Sinclair who said, well, that's the cocoon a caterpillar goes into to emerge as a butterfly. So he didn't understand why that would be such an important word that Delenn would want to hide it. So we have that. We have Lanier's concern over Delenn as she goes into this. We have Kosh, where the Vorlons have pretty much been keeping to themselves. They've been ignoring it. And not only is he saying it begins, not only is he willing to show Delenn what he looks like, but he is the one that goes out of his way to come to Sinclair and say, hey, you missed something. And push Sinclair back to seeing Delenn. So whatever's going on...
He has an investment.
Yeah. This matters to Kosh. We've seen now these shadow vessels that took out Quadrant 37. We've seen, as Trey pointing out, that the people Morden is reporting to have that same effect that we did also see in Signs and Portents, that, yes, so the technology they have for the ships seems to apply to the individuals as well.
That's handy.
Obviously, Garibaldi, there's going to have to be a conversation about how Garibaldi gets from where he is now. I guess by saying he's got the character arcs, we have kind of spoiled that he survives the attack, at least in the long term.
I think the assumption at any point in time is that the characters who are regulars will continue to be regulars unless they suddenly aren't anymore. So I don't think that's necessarily a spoiler so much as the assumption is he's going to get better.
You're right. It is the most anticipated outcome, but without naming names, we have at least 3 regulars who will not be regulars at the end of the series. There's just 3 that come to mind right now.
Alrighty.
So yeah, Babylon 5 is not afraid of killing characters.
Alright, so yeah, lots of developments, the Shadows, the Centauri Narn dynamic. Of course, that's world building, so that's germane to the show. It's just to take a big change here. The Sinclair Sakai proposal probably has portents down the road. And, Garibaldi's fate. We hope that he's better. Oh, Franklin was barely in this. And just one little tidbit I was going to mention earlier in the general discussion. I kind of felt like he was kind of being a cold-hearted person as opposed to his usual bedside manner, because he's like, sorry, I couldn't do anything. He's dead. Walks away. But that's just a minor note for Franklin.
Yeah, he's not in this much, but he and Ivanova, who, they didn't get a lot of time here, they're going to compensate for that. So they're going to get a lot more screen time in early season 2.
Good. Okay. Well, if that is it for giving form to the dream, that takes us to Comlink. But first, Trey, thank you so much for being on this episode with us.
Oh, I had a blast. Thanks for inviting me.
Are there things that you want our listeners to know about?
You mentioned it at the top of the show. You can always find me, at least until we hit the 100th one, over at 99 Years, 100 Films with Blaine, where every year we look at the most recent Best Picture winner. We have a huge lead time, so you'd have to help me, Blaine. I don't know off the top of my head, I don't know what the latest one posted was. I know what the latest one recorded was, but I don't remember. We're somewhere around maybe 63, right, in terms of what's been released?
At the time of this recording, the episode that was released yesterday was The Sound of Music. The next one we're going to record is Annie Hall. But for our listeners,
they probably want to check out the Marty episode where Jon co-hosted.
Yeah, that would be a good one to start with. And
what will you be up to by November of 2024?
Yeah, actually, this podcast should be released 2 days prior to our coverage of Titanic.
Okay. So by then, you can also listen to Jon co-host on our coverage of Godfather Part 2.
Yeah, and Silence of the Lambs, he has put his name down for, so as long as schedules continue to work out, you'll be able to hear him in a couple of places.
And I've been listening to the audiobook of The Godfather as a result of watching Godfather and The Godfather Part 2 with y'all. So it's been interesting to hear the movie being told from a novel point of view, because it's a pretty faithful adaptation, but the novel telling of the story adds a lot. Of course, as they tend to do. Okay, well, thank you again, Trey, for coming on next week.
Hang on, before we go on.
Sorry.
I was reading the wrong column of the spreadsheet, which has an error because those are the wrong dates. This episode will drop 2 days before our coverage of Platoon, so you will not be able to hear Silence of the Lambs just yet.
Okay. So Platoon comes out next week. Or in 2 days, you said.
Yes, because the 99 Years, 100 Films is always released on the 28th of the month.
Gotcha. And we are the 26th. Okay, so next week on November 2nd, we'll begin our coverage of the second season of Babylon 5. We have Points of Departure coming out soon. I'm excited about the second season, not least of which because we start getting tie-in media during the second season. So along the way of our coverage of the second season in 2024 and 2025, we'll also be covering a couple of novels and the comic book series. So I'm excited about that. So yeah, be here next week for Points of Departure. And in the meantime, we invite you to get in touch with the show. Send us your feedback. We sincerely hope that you have been doing so because we've already slotted in a couple of feedback episodes. Hopefully those have come to exist. But if they don't, we'll just, be sad. And you can change that. You can change our sadness by writing into the show. So Blaine, what's the first way they can do that?
Well, they can reach out to us by email, Babylon5 30 years later at gmail.com, using either numerals or words for the numbers.
You can also leave comments at our websites where the show is posted. The first one is, of course, johnreadscomics.com, and there is no H in, of course. You can leave comments there in the episode postings and check out the other podcasts that I have produced.
Okay. And you can also leave comments at bureau42.com, which is where all of my podcasts are hosted, including the ones that I do with Jon and Trey. So keep in mind that the comments that John reads comics, for John's sake, please don't spoil past the episode that you are commenting on or much further. We have lead time, so we're hoping to give John a bit of a buffer so that
by the time y'all actually start leaving comments, I will probably know most of what happens. But we're going to be recording the feedback episodes slotted in here, so even less for me and more for other first-time listeners, viewers. Yes, leave things spoiler-free for the future.
Yeah, if we keep recording about one per week, except for, 40 per year, I should say. At that schedule, we should be into Season 3 by the time our first episode drops, and we'll be covering Season 4 by the time you hear this.
You can also leave reviews at your favorite podcatcher. We do plan to read those and thank you for them on the air. We monitor Apple Podcasts regularly because it's easy to have access to that, and that is the most common podcast app. However, if you leave a review at another podcast source, feel free to let us know if you would like us to read that on the air, where to go find that by sending us a note at one of the other communication methods we mentioned.
All right, and then the last place that you can get to us quickly is through comments on the YouTube posts, since every episode is cross-posted to our YouTube channel, where you will also find them organized into playlists, so you can watch just Season 1, or just the feedback episodes, or just the broadcast material, and skip the comics and novels that John has mentioned, which hopefully you will do only because you want to read them before you hear our coverage to avoid spoilers and can come back to them. But you will have all of that flexibility in our playlists. And you can also find links to related channels, including links to Mark Scott Zickry's YouTube channel. So, that former guest who wrote Survivors, who was very gracious to join us for our coverage of that episode. And we also have links to channels for people who've agreed to be guests in the future, but again, I don't want to overcommit and tip our hand too much for which ones that they've signed up for, just in case schedules don't work out when it comes to it.
All right, so that takes us to the end of the episode. Once again, thank you, Trey, for being on with us. Be back next week for Points of Departure. Thank you very much for listening.
And good eating to you.